On this episode of Money and Power, we talk about SCOTUS, empathy, and Kylie Jenner's luscious lips. But first, Kid Ink.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just wanna take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on? Yeah. Really ain't nothing I could drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all okay.
Welcome to episode 13 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I'm your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan, a financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money podcast, also the human calculator, Rob Johnson.
Howdy.
And joining me in studio here in the crown jewel of rural Ohio, a mourner, a lip curator, a cave diver, Jeremiah Martin.
Hello.
Together we are the trio talk triad of the till-tattle and the triumvirate of the tete-a-tete. Guys, we got a pretty good show coming up, but how was your guys' week before we dive into all that?
Just amazing.
Were you okay with the fireworks, Rob? Did you,
How's your dog? Yeah, I mean, I'm not. It's not as though I hate. I do, but I mean, I don't. You know, they're fine. Fireworks are fine. My dog's fine. He lived. So I'm just not a big fan of fireworks, guys. Like I like seeing my kids like them, but I don't get it. I don't get people that watch YouTube videos of fireworks. I just don't understand it.
Well, I don't understand that either. Although
that's weird.
My family and I on the 4th of July. So around here, we really don't have a lot of fireworks on the 4th of July, which is kind of weird. Our city fireworks actually happen like a weekend after 4th of July. Like the weekend after, like it's up this upcoming weekend, because it's bicycle days, which is a big thing in our town. So, what our family does as a tradition is we actually watch the Magic Kingdom fireworks at Disney on their live stream on the 4th of July from the comfort of our own home.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's amazing fireworks. I'm not going to apologize for that. I will say we did go to a massively awesome illegal fireworks demonstration done by one of our friends on Saturday night. Yeah, Saturday night. And it was probably a better fireworks show than what our local city does.
What's illegal about it?
Well,
that it was in the state of Ohio,
and that it was like legit fireworks. Like they were in like Roman candles.
Back in the day. Back in the day, I remember my family, not me, but like older people in my family would go to Ohio to get fireworks. Was it not Ohio?
Oh, you can buy them here.
Oh, you just can't. Oh, I see. So you have to have a permit to light them off?
Yeah, you have to like sign an affidavit that you're not going to set them off in Ohio.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, Rob. I don't know where you were.
We talked about the legal proceedings of buying fireworks last week.
No, we talked about it in our pre-show. Well,
I didn't listen to that yet, so forgive me.
Behind the scenes, Jeremiah and I did a pre-show. We were waiting on Rob, and it will never see the light of day.
No, that's not. Well, yes, we did talk about it then, but I specifically said last week on my way over to the studio, there were fireworks going off, and yes, I can only assume that it was in relation to us recording the podcast, and I mentioned illegal fireworks, and we talked about that just briefly, but
as much as the listening audience cares about what they've already listened to last week.
And then we went into NewsBits, and last week on NewsBits we talked about
No. So anyways, we're not going to do the recap and go back and listen to it. It was an amazing episode, and we've gotten some positive feedback from it and all that jazz. So we'll get to that a little bit later. But my big news is that I'm on jury duty right now. So
you're sweet.
You're a great American.
Yeah. No, I was stoked.
What's the case? Tell us about it.
I'll be honest. I was stoked to do jury duty. And then, guys, I got called to the big leagues. Not just like little pettit jury duty. No. I got grand jury duty.
Is it the Scranton Strangler?
It's amazing.
Tell us about it.
Well, I can't tell you a lot about it because it's obviously secretive. But like learning a lot about the process is pretty fascinating. What I really love about, and so my wife had jury duty a couple weeks ago too, which is kind of weird. We got it back, but the judges in our local area do a really good job of explaining the constitutional responsibility of jury duty and why it's important and like what led up to it. And so the judge who was dealing with us and explaining it kind of went into like the background of grand juries and why, if nobody in America is charged with a felony by an official, a government official. It's done by a grand jury. And at least in Ohio, I'm sure there's some kind of weird thing in Napoleonic code that Louisiana has or something. But, here in our Constitution and in also the federal Constitution outlines grand juries for charges for crimes of infamy, which is translated or is talked about as felonies. So it was really neat. I'm kind of geek like that, but it was pretty cool to be involved in the process and see the other side of the process that a lot of people typically don't see. So for those who lament their jury duty, don't. Embrace it. It's important because obviously you can't have a jury of your peers if your peers hate it and don't show up.
I was just trying to recuse myself. Just get myself right out of there. I got things to do.
Now, this is the first time I've ever been called, so I was kind of excited. Still am. So I'm doing that. Serving indictments.
So how long does that last?
A couple months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's the time commitment like per week?
Oh, it's like I think it's like 8 to 12 total days over those.
Okay. That's not terrible.
No, it's not. And so like as opposed to like a petit jury where you kind of have jury duty, you go in and you're constantly going to voir dire, right? The jury selection process. And so you may serve on this jury, you may not, they may actually have a jury trial, they may not. It's kind of like this wishy-washy. Like I know that we will have cases to indict. So it's kind of set. And there was about 25 to 30 of us in the room, and only 13 of us get picked. And I was the last name called. But if you didn't get picked, you were released from that whole segment for the rest of the time. So, you knew you didn't have to keep calling in like you do with petit jury. So, I don't know. There's some advantages to it, but it's been fascinating. So.
Yeah, back in high school, our very own Rob Johnson was on a teen jury where I had to decide what happened with shoplifters and people that lit fires in parks and whatnot.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you were you a law and order type there?
I was. So I was always of the opinion of, I don't want these people to do this again. So I was the stiffest crime we could give them. I was forgiving because we could pick. They gave us a list and they said,
right.
And we had to decide. So any of these things you can do. So usually it was like pay back whatever amount they stole, 3x, or for community service, write a letter. So I was like, let's have them do all of it at once, And they didn't like that. So I was always it was like 12 Honest Men, but it didn't work out that well.
Gotcha.
Or 12 Angry Men. That was the name of the movie, 12 Angry Men.
Right. So Jeremiah, any jury duty? You haven't had have you had jury duty yet?
I think I've been summoned once, and I think it landed on some military service or something like that, and I couldn't do it.
It was like I was in a foreign country, I couldn't participate.
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but yeah, never been summoned again. So,
well, there you're missing out. All right, guys. Well, we have a awesome show for our the listening audience who could care less about both our recaps and also our jury duty, and they're just hoping that we can get through this. We're just going to go right into it. Now is our time for our look back at the weird, the inane, the general happenings going on in the world by the crazy people who happen to live here. NewsBits.
NewsBits. Show me your bits of news.
It's so much better now that we re-recorded that. It's great.
Yeah, better is one of those terms. It's fairly subjective.
It's all relative.
Well, for us. All right, so NewsBits. You know what? I think that I'm just going to go first. So the Trump White House announced that at 9 p.m. yesterday, we're recording on a Tuesday, so yesterday, that they would announce who their new Supreme Court justice would be. And so there was a watch on the different justices' houses, and there was a lot of speculation. And an amazing thing happened, Rob. They decided not to let the White House Communications Department know about the pick ahead of time, and there were no leaks.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Nobody knew who was going to be picked. Until I think like probably 30 minutes before somebody saw him get into a black SUV or something with Secret Service protection or something like that. But anyways, so your new SCOTUS, not appointee, but nominee is Brett Kavanaugh. And there's been, I don't know, it's like you would expect. Generally, conservatives were happy about the pick. I think that a lot of people were kind of hoping for Barrett, but this is, I thought that Ben Shapiro probably put it the best. It's like wasn't necessarily a home run, but it was a double. I would actually put it as a triple. I mean, there were a couple of the other nominees that I think I would have been less enthused about. So I would put it as like a solid double to a triple. Not a home run. I think Barrett probably would have been a home run for a lot of people. But from where I stand, I think that he's very solid on religious liberty issues, very solid on Second Amendment issues, and very solid on free speech issues. And we kind of talked about this a little bit last week. Those are the big things that could go very, very wrong very, very quickly if you have somebody of wrong ilk. The question comes, what happens with Roe v. Wade? I don't know that. Well, I don't know. I don't know that it's in danger. But that said, I don't think it's going to be as broadly applied. Meaning, we were talking about this in one of the Facebook groups that we all belong to. My biggest problem with Roe v. Wade isn't the fact that it prevents the banning of abortion. Now, it's obviously an issue for me. I'm a pro-life individual. I want to see abortion banned. I don't think there's a need for it. However, that's not the biggest issue to me. The biggest issue is the broad application of Roe v. Wade, especially with KCV Planned Parenthood, where we're not allowed to do anything as even seen as restricting abortion because they've deemed it a constitutional right. Now, there's obviously a significant difference between those two chasms of completely abolishing abortion or even common sense regulations, for example, that if you're an abortionist, you should have hospital privileges in case something goes wrong. Right? That's even be determined by some courts as being overly restrictive of a woman's right to choose. And that's insane. And I'll flat out say that's insane. But that's all because of Roe v. Wade. So I think that people who say, well, if Roe v. Wade was overturned, abortion would be illegal tomorrow. We know that's not the case. But more importantly, the biggest reason I think Roe v. Wade needs to go is it's just bad, especially when it comes to all those, what we would call common sense regulations on an industry that has a checkered past at best of actually taking care of women, let alone that there's always the result of a human being dying in the process. So that's kind of my overall take of the Kavanaugh pick. I think the another takeaway for me is that it really showed that I think Mitch McConnell didn't necessarily have the votes to get Barrett through. So that's another link to that. So what do you guys say?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. By every timeline that I've seen, if everything goes according to plan, he will be confirmed around September 21st, and so there's a whole process that has to go through prior to that. And if that's the case, and if he's confirmed, he'll have about a week before the next Supreme Court session. But what has been interesting to me related to Roe v. Wade, once again, we talk about all of the misinformation out there, everything that's talked about from both sides. One of the discussions that I got into on Facebook this week as it relates to Roe v. Wade was essentially saying that overturning Roe v. Wade it's a losing issue, that shouldn't be the goal, et cetera, et cetera. Nathan, you put it really well, that Roe v. Wade is bad on more levels than just the abortion issue. It's bad on a constitutional level. It's bad on how we interpret the Constitution and rights that are pulled out of thin air to justify ideological positions. That is a problem. I think we can all agree with that. And, we saw this with the Obergefell decision as it relates to same-sex marriage. Someone, I forget who it was, but someone put it really well, that if you want to celebrate this decision, celebrate it, as it relates to same-sex marriage, celebrate it because it's something you agree with. Don't celebrate it as it relates to the Constitution. Because any of these things that was
Roberts in his dissent.
Yes, correct. That's right. But any of these things, any of these rights that you can, quote unquote, find in the Constitution that weren't written there, eventually can be removed. That's the problem, one of the problems of activist judges. But as I was talking about this, what's really interesting is, and the person I was talking to on Facebook saying that Roe v. Wade was a losing issue and that we shouldn't be seeking to overturn that as conservatives, he was looking at polling that basically said the majority of Americans supported Roe v. Wade. I saw some polling today that framed the question differently, and I think this is really important because it really gets to the point of the misinformation and the misunderstanding out there of what overturning Roe v. Wade actually does. So there was some polling conducted that asked the question, should abortion be left to the states? And the answer to that question was overwhelmingly yes. Individual states should be able to choose their own laws and regulations as it relates to abortion. And so you have this difference in opinion, but it's not really a difference in opinion. It's a difference in understanding what this does. So all that to say, this is going to have effects that last past just confirming one justice. It'll be definitely something that we cover as we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob?
Yeah, he wasn't my first pick, but I don't know a lot about him or the decisions that he's made. I've seen a lot of people who apparently have become Supreme Court experts in the last week, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So I just don't know enough about him. So I'm very much wait and see, and we'll see how it shakes out. As I said on last week, I don't put a whole lot of stock in the Supreme Court, as I think they're really just there to rule on the law and the case, and not to legislate. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and because it's so appropriate, I think we should put on the docket. We're going to put on the docket a Supreme Court show, talk about that. I agree with you, Rob, in principle. The Supreme Court shouldn't matter, but
I think it does matter. I just don't think it should. I don't think it should matter as much as people, like, for example, on Twitter, people are saying that if whoever Trump would have nominated, who's a conservative, it's going to go back to like antebellum slavery in the South, apparently.
Right.
Which I don't understand. Like, how it's the Supreme Court. It's not like we're electing a chancellor dictator to run the country. I just don't think it's as important as people are pumping it up to be.
Well,
it's
to be
important.
fair, they said that about net neutrality and tax reform, and what what the First Lady wore yesterday, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I've died 10 times already, just so you guys know. But to your point, though, Rob, to be fair, though, okay, so let's say that the roles on this were different, okay? Let's say that Hillary Clinton wins in 2016, and she appoints 2 liberal justices to the Supreme Court. We're seeing the opposite tune, and it is doomsday from the stance of how much power we've given the Supreme Court. So I agree with you in principle, it shouldn't matter, but unfortunately we have given the Supreme Court basically unfettered checks in our checks and balances system. And the original checks and balances that were instituted are not exactly the fail-safes that we would hope so. So we call our system checks and balances from the federalism aspect. But unfortunately, the judiciary has forgot that they're the judiciary, not the legislature. And they did this in Obergefell, right? They did this. And they've done this. They did this with Roe v. Wade. And they've done this over and over again, where they've actually legislated from the bench instead of actually interpreting law. And that has become very problematic, which, so we'll talk about this in the whole show. But I agree with you in principle, but I also understand why people put so much emphasis on it, and that's because the emphasis has been taken by the Supreme Court itself. So, anyways, we'll talk about that in a later episode. Jeremiah, your news bit.
Yeah, so this has been in the news for the last couple weeks. It seems like the situation has finally been resolved. But as those in the audience may remember, there was a soccer team that has been trapped in a cave for this is the end of a 3-week debacle, and they were finally fully rescued. The final boy and the coach were the last of the team to be rescued. Actually, just today, so a couple days ago, once this releases. But it was a complicated, convoluted 3-day operation, and they've been trapped there for over 3 weeks. But thankfully, they have been rescued. There was a Thai a Thai SEAL that was killed in the process. That died trying to bring them oxygen, as they were dangerously low on oxygen multiple times. So the fact that this is resolved is definitely a bit of good news, and it's kind of been all over the news the past couple weeks. So to see that resolved is definitely a positive news story.
Yeah, it's crazy, this story. So cave diving is one of the most dangerous things that you can possibly do in the diving community. Open dives are nothing compared to it. And my understanding is they weren't doing cave diving, right? They were in these caves. They were spelunking, and then during a monsoon season, that's a whole other thing. But then they became trapped. I can't imagine being trapped essentially in a cave for that long. But fortunately, it ended very well, except for the SEAL who gave his life trying to help them. And that soccer coach is probably not going to be on the next field trip committee, I would guess. Just a guess. Rob, have you followed this story at all?
No. This is one of the stories that has completely been off my radar. I did see today that it was today or yesterday that whoever was left was rescued, but I didn't even know that someone had died in the operation. So that's news to me. But I'm glad it's resolved.
Yeah, the cool thing. So if you have some spare time out there, listeners, go to Elon Musk's Twitter feed and some of the stuff that they've been trying to do. He has the boring company, and he has some other stuff. So people reached out to him. So they were working on some things to try to put in place that they've basically invented on the fly. One was they were in a test tank with basically a mini submarine that they just developed and created pretty spectacularly, that would have done the maneuvers necessary, but they couldn't get it there in time. But they're going to be able to use it for possibly future rescues and stuff like that. So an amazing testament to what can happen when private business and private capital tries to solve a problem versus government tries to solve an issue. So it's phenomenal to go through and read a lot of those tweets. So that's kind of my overall on that one.
So looking at his Twitter feed right now, just a couple quick things. He said some good feedback from cave experts in Thailand, iterating with them on an escape pod design that might be safe enough to try. Also building an inflatable tube with airlocks, less likely to work given tricky contours, but great if it does. Got more great feedback from Thailand. Primary path is basically a tiny kid-sized submarine using the liquid oxygen transfer tube of Falcon rocket as whole. Light enough to be carried by 2 divers, small enough to get through narrow gaps, extremely robust. And he continues, just on the fly, as Nathan said, on the fly, just building and iterating and trying to, invent equipment on the spot to fit this very specific need. So very, very needed. And it was, like I said, really glad to see that everything, with the exception of the one life lost of the seal, great to see that everything worked out right and they were all rescued and safe and sound.
Some good news.
Absolutely.
In other good news, Rob, what's your news bit?
Yeah. So we talked about the Supreme Court, and then we talked about the Thailand incident. This is more of a celebrity news. So Kylie Jenner reveals on Instagram that she removed her lip filler. So this was the trending news on 2 websites. And a couple things from the article here that I think our listeners will probably care about. She says, I got rid of all my filler. And she said, when you get them done, you're like, oh, it could be a little bit bigger on that side. I'd like to go back and be like, they went down and think they could be bigger, but I went too far. It was very painful. So that was my news bit. She is apparently doing very well, and will make a full recovery. So good on that.
So your news bit is that her lips are back to normal.
That's right.
Good. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Rob, you said you had something fresh, and you did not disappoint. So
no, it's fresh. It's amazing.
When I think about the Venn diagram of what we're interested in, what our listeners are interested in, what's topical, current, relevant, right smack dab in the middle is Kylie Jenner's lips.
It's right there.
So you know what? Thank you, Rob.
Well, I mean,
for your service.
She has 111. You're very welcome. She has 111 million Instagram followers. So I mean, I guarantee at least 4 or 5 of our 13 listeners follow her. I got to be in there somewhere.
No, listen.
Considering you're obviously one of them.
Yeah.
I don't follow her. This just came up on Google as a trending article. So I don't even know. I don't even know who she is, but I know she's related somehow to Kim Kardashian, I think. So.
Well, I was just about to compliment you on the fact that you knew who Kylie Jenner was in the first place, and then you blew that. So, all right, that's good. She wasn't born before 1984, so I don't really care. That's right. She's not. She hasn't had her guest appearance on MASH.
No, I only care about like Blythe Danner and Ron Howard.
Yeah. Which, by the way, can we talk about how weird those like guest appearances are? It's like hey, these random celebrities are in Korea.
You know, something that's interesting. I was watching MASH the other day. Shocker. And Patrick Swayze was actually on an episode of MASH. And his character on the show was diagnosed with leukemia. That was the storyline of the show. So very strange. And he went on to die from pancreatic cancer. But I thought that was strange how that works out. But yeah, good stuff. MASH is a good show, guys.
You know what's even weirder than the guest appearances? This happened a lot in sitcoms during the 90s, where these different sitcoms had like mashups, where one universe was magically in the same universe as another one, and they would, and it made really no sense.
None.
It didn't add to the storyline whatsoever, but the casts of both shows just happened to be together. And
like, wasn't Family Matters and Full House together on one? I think
there was.
Yeah, and so was King of Queens and Everyone Loves Raymond.
Yes.
But they were at least based in the same state. Like,
was Everyone Loves Raymond in New York? I didn't know that.
Wasn't it?
I don't
know. One of our listeners will correct us on it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It was weird. Like Chicago and San Francisco. So.
Yeah, there was a bunch of them though. It's just like, is this where we're at? Like you ran out of storylines, and maybe we can get the fan bases of both.
Yeah, because they're all on TGIF.
Jump the shark.
Like people, guess what? ABC, everyone's watching TGIF. Like, they're watching all 4 shows on TGIF. So it really adds no value. Even like if you think about it that way, it adds 0 value because we're all watching those episodes.
Unlike Rob's news bit that attempts to bring in some of Kylie Jenner's 11 million followers to follow our show, hey, there's room for improvement there. Like we could gain some of those followers, but
it was 100.
Well, hold on. Point of correction here. 111 million. So that's 10 times the fan base there.
Yeah.
So she's killing it. Apparently, I don't know what she does. The article did say, I know we spent like 14 minutes on each of yours news bits, and I got 48 seconds. So I'm gonna go on this a little bit longer. Apparently. Apparently, Jenner launched her famed Kylie Jenner lip kits following the buzz about her pout. Whew. Never thought I'd read that sentence. Reports claim she made about $8.7 million from her cosmetic line. So she's an entrepreneur.
Listen.
Her sister was only famous after being in a porno. So it sounds like she's actually doing something meaningful. So...
Well, that's that would be a great poll question for our audience. Is a leaked sex tape a quote-unquote porno? Okay, that's not a good question. But I don't agree with your classification there, Rob.
All right, well, I'm going to send off an email to John Piper, see what he thinks, get a ruling from the judge.
Ask John.
And
ask John.
So,
could you imagine that episode
Rob,
coming on his podcast?
Nobody knows.
On today's episode of Ask Pastor John, we're going to be talking about whether or not Kim Kardashian was in a porno. Bill, play the intro music.
I think the question specifically is a sex tape I'm not getting down this rabbit hole. This is bad rabbit hole. Anyways,
okay. So going back to his news bit. Rob, you can't really be upset when you only get 48 seconds. When you fully complete your news bit, and Nathan and I have no comments. Is that our fault?
It's not my fault. I'm more. It's not. It is. I'm more cultured than you guys. It's not my fault.
Nobody said it was.
All right,
kids.
I just want to understand. No one, the Supreme Court, it's boring, right? It's a bunch of old people in robes sitting around making rulings about things people think it's like Batman v Superman. They don't even know.
That's true.
They don't even know. Kylie Jenner's out here making money.
Question of the week for our listeners. Do we need to be more cultured? Let us know.
A question of the week is, what do the Kardashians do? I think because we all know who they do.
Oh, now I got to mark the episode as explicit. Thanks.
I don't think that's
so
explicit.
We're gonna have
Listen, and we also know whose careers they ruin. NBA players. Like if you touch a Kardashian, you're going down the tubes.
So, a couple years ago, my mind was blown when I finally made the connection of everyone that is related to the Kardashians and that the dad was OJ's lawyer.
Yeah.
That plus the relation to Bruce Jenner and it just the whole family circle is like, I'm speechless. It's pretty interesting
and
rabbit hole there.
I have to give it to Rob. Rob's right. People actually care.
For some reason, yes, they do.
I don't know if they should, but they do. And the Kardashians are very good at staying relevant.
Yeah.
And Kim
just
Kim
to
is
stay
still
relevant.
married to Kanye.
Bruce Jenner even got
Bruce Jenner even
got a sex change to stay relevant.
I never thought that would, happen. I never thought the sex change would happen either.
Well, and then he's going to get, and then he's going to reverse it.
Here's the real news
stay,
bit.
to stay
Nathan is
relevant.
not Nostradamus. I just don't have a clue. So. All right.
Well, that's a sufficient amount of time for my news bit. We can move on.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I was about to say, did we meet your quota?
Yeah, I just want to make sure your tank's getting filled.
Move on to the next segment.
That's what I'm here for, as the conductor of this runaway train. All right. So last week we did our first segment of in our leadership series. And it was well received, I thought. People have reached out, have said how much it meant to them. So thank you to all you who were lying to me. No. But anyways, I genuinely hope that you got something out of it. So what you are going to hear now is part 2 of my talk on leadership, specifically dealing with the 5 laws of relationship. And we will be listening to these and expounding on them and how they relate to our various fields. And this week's is kind of touches on the power of empathy and how that is a gateway to relationship. The second law of relationship. Empathy is the gateway to relationship. The precept from this comes from Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. That seems so simple, right? Rejoice when others rejoice, and when they mourn, we mourn. But it really isn't that simple. Admittedly, most of us are really good at the latter. When people experience loss, we are generally good at the pretense of mourning with them. But let me ask you this question. Getting sympathy from a stranger or getting empathy from a friend, which is better? So our first lesson of this is the order is important. Why is the harder task in this dynamic put first? And I think it is that way for a reason. So to explain, let me offer an example. There are 2 coworkers who were hired at the same time. Because of this, they became friends. They both are pretty even in their performance, but one just seems to have the Midas touch and gets promoted time and time again. The one friend has some bitterness and jealousy, and that slowly seeps into their relationship. And pretty soon, the promoted friend doesn't even tell his friend about good news in his life anymore. Because there just isn't a reason to upset the apple cart, because he knows it upsets them. Pretty soon, that promoted friend doesn't tell him much of anything. And years later, the one who was not promoted finds out on Facebook that the other's mom has died. Now, he offers thoughts and prayers on his wall, just like everybody else. Now, that relationship did not hinge on the humility of the promoted. It fundamentally hinged on the attitude of the other friend. If he had rejoiced in his friend's success, he would have been there to minister to his friend when he needed it most. But when we choose to not rejoice when others rejoice, we will not be offering empathy as a friend, but merely sympathy as a stranger. And that's not what's needed. Now, the second lesson of this is obviously that mourning when others mourn is more than mere thoughts and prayers. Now, simply put, empathy is harder than sympathy because it forces you to feel and to minister to someone on a different level. Now, I'm not opposed to thoughts and prayers, but when a friend needs someone's shoulder to cry on, it requires actual presence and understanding. Indeed, being there is most of the battle. I've heard it said that Job had the best friends until they opened their mouths. Right? How true. Most of us know the story of Job. Job was wealthy, and the devil claimed he was just faithful because of his blessing, so God let him take away everything. In his despair, some friends visit them. At first, they sit and they listen. They are comforting, and then they try to help. And it isn't very helpful at all. And if you read that account, you'll understand why it wasn't helpful, because they weren't just a presence of empathy. Which leads us to the second law of transaction. An inch deep and a mile wide isn't good enough. Well, how long do I have to be there to not make Mother mad? Joe stated emphatically to his wife. I don't know, honey. 2 hours tops, came the reply. And just like that, they were out the door to another Thanksgiving traditional meal. And this is something that plays out in America over and over again. Meaningful empathy is not achieved in surface-level relationships. Man, this is an important nugget to grasp. I hope you understand that. Meaningful empathy is not achieved in surface-level relationships. Transactional thinking is always trying to make your deep relationships shallower. Relational thinking is always trying to make your shallow relationships deeper. And if you are starting to believe that this world of transaction is a lonely one, you are starting to get the picture. But it happens to all of us. Family gatherings become mere obligation, not desire. You start thinking in increments of time as what is a bare minimum. How much do I have to be at home before my wife will leave me? The transactional will say that an inch deep and a mile wide is good enough because you don't need anything more to make the deal. How much, let's go ahead and throw just an annual retreat to make our employees feel special this one time. Do we even have to do an annual retreat? Maybe we just do a conference call. We're always looking at the bare minimums. Just do what is needed, not what meets the other's needs. But the sad reality is, when you think in terms of minimums, you often miss the mark. You don't hit it. The time you thought was good enough for your kids, it wasn't. Your wife, they left you. Your business got taken away, destroyed. Minimalist thinking and relationships don't mix. But more fundamentally, it's about what goes around also comes around, right? And the sad thing to understand and sad thing to grasp is that when you look around, you realize you have these shallow relationships and something bad happens to you, there is no one to minister to you. There is no one's shoulder that you can cry on. There is no one who has rejoiced when you rejoice, and no one who can mourn when you mourn. And so then you become just another successful statistic, begging for sympathy from strangers because you have no empathy to get from friends. All right, guys, so kind of what are your follow-up thoughts to that and this second law of a relationship, Rob?
Yeah, so I thought you did a very nice job of framing that and explaining the benefit of having legitimate empathy. And this goes back to something we discussed a couple of weeks ago, which we talked about, is profit the most important thing in a business? And this poses another question. Are relationships more important than profit in business? And the answer, for me at least, is absolutely relationships are more important. Because the relationships are, again, going to be a fuel for the byproduct that is profit and success. The other thing that I thought was valuable that you had said was the difference between sympathy and empathy. And the way that I always frame this is sympathy is, they're both fine, like they're both absolutely fine, but as you get to deeper levels with both of them, you can understand the application of them. So sympathy is basically just feeling sorrow for somebody. Generally, sympathy is something that ought to be reserved for someone who is an acquaintance. Empathy, on the other hand, is actually understanding and relating, or at least listening to the other person's feelings. You're actually getting a deeper gathering of what's actually going on in their lives. And that's generally what happens through actual friendships. Now, you can have empathy for other people long distance, but empathy played out long term normally only takes place in the context of friendships and meaningful relationships. So all very good stuff. I thought you did a very good job on it.
Well, yeah, and there's definitely a difference between feeling sorry for somebody and actually feeling their pain. And that you're absolutely correct on that, especially as it relates to business. And, there are some people out in our listening audience who are trying to run a business, and they're running around and they're in that transactional mindset. Profit. And we said over and over again, profit's not bad. Nobody on this podcast believes profit's bad. We believe that transactional thinking is wrong-headed. And that's kind of the sad reality, is that if you are relational thinking, that profit's going to be even more fruitful. Jeremiah.
Yeah, I like the concept of empathy when you think about rejoice as others rejoice, mourn as others mourn. I like the idea of the kind of inverse relationship between the two. Because you even mentioned that it's really easy to kind of have a surface level sympathy or, feigned empathy when someone passes away, someone's loved one passes away. Everyone feels bad about that, but it's a lot harder to have kind of a faux sense of empathy when something good happens. And those things are inversely connected, that you can't really in any healthy relationship, you can't really have one without the other. And so, which came first, you can make that argument, but they are inversely connected, that you got to have one. You can't have one without the other. And I think that's really important to understand in all of our relationships. And, when you think about people that we all might know that are transactional, there is we can pick that out, that they might be there to say thoughts and prayers, but they're definitely not there to congratulate you when you have a promotion or something positive in your life, especially if they feel like everything's going wrong in their life. So it's a really important thing to understand, I think.
Yeah, it's, again, going back to, and we've talked about this before, you get a lot of lessons from your kids. And what I found constantly is that it is a mantra that is in our house all the time. We rejoice when others rejoice. I don't have to remind my kids to feel bad when others feel bad. I don't. It's a natural reaction. They're hurting, I'm going to go comfort them. Like, that's just natural. It's a human reaction. What I do have to remind my children constantly, we rejoice when others rejoice. When you think that your sister is getting a sleepover and she didn't deserve it and you haven't gotten your sleepover, we rejoice when others rejoice. When something positive happens to them, maybe they got, $50 to babysit or something like that. When something positive happens in their life, we're going to rejoice when they rejoice, because that takes a conscious effort. And in relationships, if I had one way to really kind of hone down on what relational versus transactional is. Transactional is easy. Relational is hard. So if you are taking the easy road in your relationships, it is a transactional road. Because it fights against human nature. Deep, meaningful relationships fight against human nature. Transactional relationships go along with human nature. And that's kind of the overall crux of what we're talking about, and also why we have a tendency to believe, as believers, that it's important. Because when we're talking in the context of actually ministering to people, and by ministering to people, I don't mean it as necessarily being a minister, but I think we're all called to minister to those in our lives and those who come through our spheres of influence. And to adequately minister to somebody, you're going to have to give of yourself. And that's relational. It's not transactional. It's not easy. It's difficult. And that's kind of what we're hoping to kind of pave the way for folks through this series.
The one thing that I would say, and maybe just a little bit of pushback, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, is, I have actually had my kids, they push their sibling or they fall down and like, ha ha ha, you got hurt. And so there is that level of, when I think of human nature, I think that there is that level of, and even that, you could say is transactional, because going back to last week in the golden rule, it's like, well, they pushed me, so I can push them. Right. And if they get hurt, I can laugh about it because, well, they pushed me in the first place. So there's that, but I kind of think of it as a spectrum. Yeah. That, if you have not, think of like a good relationship, a neutral relationship, and a bad relationship. If you have a really bad relationship with someone and you really dislike them, or even if you hate them, yeah, you will actually be glad when something bad happens to them, or maybe even someone they love, because it's like, oh, well, they deserved it. So not only will you not be happy when something good happens to them, you definitely won't be happy, or you will actually be happy if something bad happens to them. But then when you have that more of a neutral relationship where, maybe I have enough empathy to say, hey, I really feel bad that something bad happened to you, but not enough to really appreciate that you got that promotion that maybe I should have got. But then when you get to that point, and as your empathy grows, that your ultimately your relationship's going to grow with that individual, but they've got to grow equally. And I think that's kind of the point, is there's an inverse relationship, so you can't have one without the other. So as you're rejoicing with them, you'll also be mourning with them. And the higher that goes up on the scale, the better a relationship you'll have with that individual.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you completely. It is a spectrum. And I think that the inability to mourn when others mourn is really next level, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's like gasp worthy. That's like, you're evil, right? Yeah. If you even look like in popular culture, like the movies where, the evil person is the one who, it's not that they're jealous that somebody got something nice. It's when they fall on their face and then they laugh at them or something. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like, it's that next level of, but jealousy is kind of understood. We understand that. What we have a hard time understanding is that kind of evil, almost maniacal thing. But what I'm trying to show is that they're linked. And you're right, it is a spectrum. And if you lack the empathy on one, you're going to eventually lack the empathy on the other. And you are going to find yourself this calloused individual. Any other final words, Rob?
No, I think you guys are hitting it out of the park. I could only reverb what you guys have said. I think it's all good stuff.
All right.
So one last point. We actually had a buddy of mine who listened to the podcast and asked a couple questions about things we might be talking about on the podcast related to leadership. He asked if we were going to cover replacement-driven leadership, and it's this idea of kind of replacing that next generation, mentoring up that next generation of leadership. And I think, and while my answer at the time was, I don't know if we're going to deal with it specifically, I think it fits perfectly into this point, and that is that as a leader, if you're leading people, and you actually have that relational quality to your relationship that has that empathy, where you can rejoice where others rejoice, you can mourn where others mourn. You have maybe that subordinate that is, they're growing in their skills, they're getting better at their job, and you can actually be happy that this might be your replacement one day. That you can actually be happy that I might be working myself out of a job because this person is so good that they're going to be my replacement, rather than what is kind of a typical leadership mentality sometimes in a hierarchy, which is I'm going to get replaced if I'm not careful, only worrying about oneself.
Yeah, and
that's.
Go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, Nathan.
And I think you're absolutely 100% right. And that's why I almost don't like calling this a leadership series. I almost prefer to call it a relationship series, except for the fact that if we called it a relationship series, everybody would expect us to give marital and parental advice, although I think that there's some dynamics of that that are applicable. And so we call it a leadership series, but you're going to see through these different laws of relationship, there are little tidbits that are going to be applicable across the board. And I think mentorship is one of those things. I think we firmly have a duty to mentor others. And also I think the older generation has a duty to mentor us. And I think that goes, we're actually going to touch on this point. And it's called the power of community. And we're going to dive deeper into that. I believe that is, number 4. So the fourth part of the series is going to dive into community. And basically the premise of that, I don't want to kind of ruin it, but the premise of that is that we're not islands amongst ourselves. And the biggest danger of transactional thinking is that you're going to become an island to yourself. Not only are you not going to find people willing to mentor you because the shallowness, but you're not going to be able to find people to actually mentor and pour into because you're just not going to prioritize it. And I think that we do see that, and we see the danger in that in companies all the time, Rob, when we see these transitions happen. And you have maybe a very dynamic leader at the very top, and then all of a sudden something happens to that leader. Maybe it's through death or through retirement, and then the vision falters because there's really no suitable replacements. Because that mentorship wasn't taking place. I can't remember the exact statistic. Maybe Rob, you have it, but family-owned companies typically don't survive the second transition to that third generation, and that's within a family. If you think about trying to groom your replacement and really focusing on mentoring, you think that you would do that with your own child. And that's not happening. And so I know that it's not happening in a broader sense in corporate America with people that aren't related to each other. And, Rob, what are your kind of overall thoughts on that?
Well, a couple of things. There's a leadership theory that I subscribe to, and have done a lot of research and writing on. It's called transformational leadership. It's very similar to what Jeremiah was talking about. The basic tenet of transformational leadership is making sure that you are identifying people on your team who can essentially level up to your position. And that's how I do it where I work. And I'm constantly trying to, we have a smaller team, so the person who is directly under me, trying to make sure that he has the skills and abilities to take over what I do. And there's two reasons for that. One, if you are in a position where you don't want the people under you to do better, that really says a lot about your character or lack thereof.
Right. Absolutely.
Because if you are in a position where you don't want them to do well, that says two things. One, that says that you don't care about their advancement and whatever it is they're doing. And two, it says that you don't want to advance yourself. And you're saying that because you are clearly showing that the position that you're in is the position that you want to stay in, which isn't necessarily the best thing. So an idea of transformational leadership is that there's fluidity in positions and that people are leveling up underneath, and then the people who are leading the teams are going off elsewhere to carry that leadership philosophy to other divisions of the company. And I think it's a extremely impactful leadership style that more companies need to embrace.
I couldn't agree more. That's well stated. And you can tell those cultures. I think, everybody around, this table has been involved with bad cultures that were transactional, and where there was a lot of, we'll call it institutional jealousy, if you will. And it's not beneficial. And you're absolutely right. I think they call it transformational leadership for a reason, and that's because it can transform those cultures and those companies. So, great word on that. All right, so that kind of ends that segment. I believe that we got some feedback, Jeremiah.
Yes, absolutely. So as a reminder, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Money Power Pod, and you can send us an email. You can send us voice memos. You can send us memes. You can send us selfies. I mean, whatever you want on our email, moneypowerpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you in any of those formats. So we did have a couple people that reached out to us this week. First of all, Jay Trailer says, I'm a little behind, just finished episode number 11. I loved Rob's and Nathan's definition of the primary focus of businesses being service. Reminded me of Peter Drucker. I don't have any business school training or classes, but started reading Drucker about 10 years ago when I was getting into management. I was really encouraged by y'all's thoughts. This episode, including the nuanced conversation about right of refusal and Red Hen versus Masterpiece Cake Shop. Keep it up. Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate the feedback there. Also, it's always good to know that people are listening. So our friend from across the pond, Chris James Studdard, said, commented on a post that we posted on Facebook related to Chick-fil-A. And he said, so as the outside guy, I tried several fast food places while in the U.S. Chick-fil-A was amazing for customer service. I have never been anywhere where I felt so appreciated for my custom, and they couldn't do enough. They couldn't do enough for me. Loved it. So less feedback about us and more about Chick-fil-A, but still, we appreciate the comment on Facebook. And
absolutely, because obviously we propelled Chick-fil-A into that. I mean,
well, right, yeah. I mean, Chick-fil-A, you should sponsor us. I mean, we're obviously sending people your way.
Yeah, they obviously listened to our leadership thing last week, and overnight, just like that.
That's right. It's all because of us. And then finally, ADD Masterminds hit us up on Twitter and said, so just realized that at Money Power Pod is pretty much our nemesis. Stay tuned. ... I don't know what that means. But that's another podcast. ADD Masterminds. I guess they're them's fighting words. I
guess. I don't know what it means either. Rob, do you have any insight?
No.
No, there you have it.
Yeah. I don't. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I guess we're their nemesis.
I can say when you're on the top of the heap, people are always gunning for you.
It's true. They're always coming for the king. Here's my word of advice, ADD Masterminds. If you're gunning for the king, you best not miss.
Ooh. So, just for context, the definition of nemesis is the inescapable agent of someone or something's downfall. I mean, it kind of seems like they got a victim mentality going on.
A little bit.
Like we're their nemesis. We're going to take them down. I'm just saying, if we take you down and we're not even trying to take you down, I mean, is that really our
Canadian?
Fault? One of them is, yes.
So, was there like a immediate tweet apology for possibly offending us after this?
I didn't receive it, but it might have got mixed up in the DMs. I don't know.
Maybe.
All those Putin DMs.
Also, it's yeah, right. Also, it's not as though we're a top 25 show, so I don't know where they're going to take us down to. I mean, once does it get lower than the basement? Like, I don't know. I don't think that.
So in one segment, you said we were at the top of the heap, and then you said we're in the basement.
Well, notice I said heap. Like it's.
That's right. You just didn't. It's actually on the top of the heap in the basement.
Well, it's like the laundry chute goes down to the basement.
Yes.
We're on top of the dirty laundry, but we're still in a pile of laundry. Is what he's saying.
That makes sense.
It's like the best part of a house in Hoarders.
Wow. So that's our best corner right over there. That's money and power.
They're we have 13 listeners. They're taking away to 10, I guess. 3 went over to ADD Masterminds. Ooh, maybe we took 3 of their listeners. I don't know. They're like now just their cousin, their mom, and one province in Canada listens. By one province, I mean like 2 people and a moose. All right. So please reach out to us, feedback. Obviously, if you reach out to us for feedback, you're going to make the show. This is the prime time because when we get to the top floors, when we're moving on up, like George Jefferson, like you can forget it.
Yeah. So reach out to us at Money Power Pod on all socials, and I do want to give special thanks to my buddy SJ, who did reach out and ask a couple questions about our leadership series, and so we will we mentioned one tonight, but we'll bring those up as the series goes along.
All right, awesome. Well, we've come to the part of the show affectionately known as parting shots. Jeremiah, what is your parting shot?
So earlier today, one of my...
Wait a second. Is this going to be a good parting shot? Because if it is, we're going to stick you at the end. Because obviously we had some problems last week. You came out with a parting shot that I don't know that Rob or I knew that you were capable of delivering. It was amazing. So, you know what? Hold on to your parting shot.
Well,
Rob, what's your parting shot?
All right, so sticking with the trend that I am about 15 years behind on pop culture, I watched a series the other day that I'm going to recommend. It was from 2001. It's called Band of Brothers, and it was on Amazon Prime. So I thought it was good. It's Tom Hanks produced it. Steven Spielberg produced it. It's very similar to Saving Private Ryan. It follows a group of guys from basic to really the end of the war. It's really good stuff. So if you have Amazon Prime, it is on there. It's 10 episodes, about an hour an episode, and it's really, really good.
It is. It is a very good show. Do you think it's like a peak David Schwimmer? Even over Friends?
I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I don't even know what peak David Schwimmer is.
Never mind. Listen, you waited out a little bit, like out of the kiddie pool with the pop culture stuff, and I just dunked you under. I apologize for that. My bad.
Do you want to know how many episodes Burt Metcalf directed of MASH?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, 36.
So far, we've had recapping our own podcast. We've had weird angles. We have MASH trivia, and we had dictionary time with Jeremiah. This has been an eventful podcast. We're just aiming at all cylinders. All right, Jeremiah, what's your parting shot?
So first of all, Band of Brothers is great. So definitely second that.
And it's timeless. So it doesn't matter that it came out in 2001. It's timeless. If you haven't watched it by now, take the time.
Yeah. So my parting shot today is people are going to be so disappointed. No, but I had a friend post on Facebook today, just a pretty menial Facebook post. It wasn't about anything specific, but he mentioned, well, it doesn't matter, but it was just a pretty menial Facebook post. It was kind of a joke, but not related to anything. Definitely not related to anything political. And someone commented and made it about President Trump. Like, he's this and he's that, and he's whatever. And I was like, you are so consumed with the president that a Facebook post that has nothing to do with him, you're bringing him into the conversation. And I just want to encourage people that, ultimately, I believe that elections matter. I believe that the Supreme Court matters. I believe that these things matter. They do. But if your daily life is so consumed by who is in the White House that it is infiltrating every single one of your conversations, like, you need to get a life. Like,
yeah,
I have issues with things President Trump does. I had issues with things President Obama did, but there were entire days, maybe even entire weeks, I don't know, that I went without even thinking about the president. And I still, like, I don't think about the president, is not the first thing I think about when I wake up. Like, if that is all you think about, like, get a life. If your life is so consumed with what, like, it's, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. Like, go live your life, enjoy your life. This is not Nazi Germany. We are not going to, go back to, the Civil War, slavery times. It's not going to happen. So just enjoy your life.
I saw one tweet by somebody who said, like, because Trump's president, they haven't been able to eat well. They haven't been. I was like, you have some. That's not a Trump issue. That's a you issue. Like, if he's affecting your sex life, this is just some relationship advice for the general populace. If he's affecting your sex life, then that's a you issue. That is not a Donald Trump issue. Just pointing that out.
I actually almost brought this as my my news bit, but I forgot about it till just now. But this is an actual title of an article, actual headline. I stopped going to the gym because of Trump, and now I can't open jars.
It's an actual headline.
That is an actual headline, and it is not ironic.
And
at all.
I read it, and I was like, what is going on? Like, this basically, this person went into a stupor. They just, like, they're not going to the gym anymore, working out, so now they can't open jars for themselves. Like, what? That's not a Trump issue. That is not an accurate reflection of what's going on in society.
Right.
That is an accurate reflection of what's going on in your own life. Look in the mirror.
Well, I guess they had a negative experience. It wasn't even a negative experience. There was a Trump supporter at their gym,
right?
That basically after the election they couldn't fathom seeing again because they were so distraught. So they stopped going to the gym, and now they're so weak that they can't open jars. Guys, if this is your life, and this goes for whoever is president, like I said, President Trump was President Obama. I did not affect my life in this way at all. Like, get a life and enjoy it. Like, life, there's more to life than who's president, and he really doesn't affect your day-to-day life that much.
No.
So,
yeah, great parting shot. So my parting shot is going to be a recommendation. Going to do a recommendation. Obviously, we're in a kind of leadership series, so I'm going to recommend a leadership book. I kind of pseudo-recommended it when we were talking about business leaders, but I do recommend Entre Leadership by Dave Ramsey. It's been, first of all, it's a quick read. I enjoy books that are a quick read and not going to involve me taking an entire beach vacation to read through. I don't need a Tommy on leadership. But I do like little snippets because I read a lot of leadership books because I want to see what's going on in the leadership world. But also, you can get a grain of sand, little grains of truth in about anything you're going to read. There's going to be little grains of truth, right? As my grandpa used to say, the trick is take all those grains of sands of truth and build yourself a beach, right? So, you're going to take some here, take some there. And that is... that's kind of what I do. So anyways, Entre Leadership, I recommend that. We'll be coming up with some other recommendations coming up. I do have a correction and apology real quick, though. It was pointed out to me. I mentioned last week that when we were talking about the Supreme Court nominees, I mentioned that Kennedy was looking at the free speech things, and that was not necessarily my own thought. I had seen and I agreed with it. And it was from Eric Erickson. So,
yes.
Shout out to Eric Erickson for making that same point on Twitter. And sorry I did not attribute it appropriately because I completely agree with it. But I kind of passed it off on my own. Shouldn't have done that because it was just in my psyche at the point. So yeah, if I get those things from others, I will try to appropriately attribute those. So yeah,
there you go.
Mea culpa. Yeah, what are you going to do? All right. Well, one thing I'm not going to apologize for the length of this podcast. So, for Jeremiah Martin, for Rob Johnson, I am Nathan Martin. Thank you for listening. Good night and good luck.
This episode of Money and Power was brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. You can use the coupon code MAP for 20% off all orders at strikeforceenergy.com.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz.